And so we arrive to the end of this class and the end of the internet which has ended by being killed by the internet, by the fact that through these years and years of adapting new technology to adapt to new technology to adapt to new technology to adapt to whatever our needs are, we've reached the point where the efficiency and the efficacy of the internet is now in question for a lot of people. And it is in question because this is just a normal process of change that is happening, that keeps on happening to us, and that we keep on realizing every so often that it is happening. The most obvious example of that being the year 2000 Y2K bug that was heralded as kind of an end of the world event, but that was not the most obvious one of them. There were others which have been talked about for quite a while. And here, this article or this conference paper that was presented by Werner Vidge, who talked about the technological singularity. Within 30 years, we will have the technological means to create superhuman intelligence. Shortly after, the human era will be ended. Is such progress avoidable? If not to be avoided, can events be guided so that we may survive? These questions are investigated. Some possible answers and some further dangers are presented. This paper tells us about the technological means which will slowly catch up with us over the course of, as he's pointing out here, 30 years to have machines that are eventually better than us, humans, better than the creators of those machines. Just as much as the internet has killed the internet, maybe the internet could kill us eventually. Interestingly enough, this article was presented in 1993. That is 30 years ago, just about to the date. As we are looking at this barrel of the technology changing us and creating superhumans, it seems a little bit underwhelming at this point in time. But the concern expressed by Vinge in this paper is something that we have mentioned quite a bit over the course of the semester. All of these new changing uh, capacities around us and the new conditions in which we are living have very fundamentally changed the way that we live. Not so much in the fact that we are new superhumans, but in the fact that our daily life is fundamentally altered. Vinge talks about the acceleration of technological progress has been the central feature of this century. I argue in this paper that we are on the edge of change comparable to the rise of human life on Earth. The precise cause of this change is the imminent creation of by technology of entities with greater than human intelligence. There are several means by which science may achieve this breakthrough, and this is another reason for having confidence that the event will occur. First, the development of computers that are quote unquote awake and superhumanly intelligent. To date, most controversy in the area of artificial intelligence relates to whether we can create human equivalents in a machine. But if the answer is yes, we can, then there is little doubt that beings more intelligent can be constructed shortly thereafter. Large computer networks and their associated users may quote unquote wake up as a superhumanly intelligent entity. Computer human interfaces may become so intimate that users may reasonably be considered superhumanly intelligent, or biological science may find ways to improve upon the natural human intellect. So, along the line, some of these predictions or some of these possibility have reached some level of understanding today. There are AI, artificial intelligence models that exist out here that have certainly created new rules for the usage of most websites, of most video games, of most practical technological applications. But none of those have proven to be anywhere near the superhuman level. The large computer networks are certainly there, and their associated users are certainly there as well, but it doesn't seem like at this point in time they will commonly put together, converge to a waking up stage. If anything, most people have kind of emphasized how much people are separated by the internet or kind of put into a different geographical space by the fact that they can communicate over technological means. The computer-human interfaces I've also developed. We've mentioned virtual reality, and somebody in the message boards posted this the thought experiment of a virtual reality machine that could cause death. Yes, in that case, this would be considered a human-ending event, but we are nowhere near the superhumanly intelligent. This is not a very smart idea. And the biological science has certainly progressed to the point that we can now create much more efficient biological models, but we are nowhere near the understanding of the natural human intellect that would be necessary to be changed through these technological means. Now, if you saw on the previous slide, the Vinge is a mathematical science professor, or essentially what would be a computer science person when he started. He is now retired, but he is still writing. In fact, he is writing mostly science fiction books. And a good bit of the angle that Vinge is taking here is very much one of science fiction, one that he expressed just a year before in this book, A Fire Upon the Deep. Imagine a new and mostly human colony right at the top of the beyond. That's just the name of the place that they are living in. And Strom welcomed folk in the mother world. Their enterprise was less than 100 years old. They or their children would be the first humans anywhere in the galaxy to transcend their own humanity. She might end up a god and richer than a million beyond the worlds. It was a dream real enough to provoke constant arguments with her parents, for there is heaven and there can also be hell. That in and of itself is the change, the type of change that Vinge is envisaging in his writing, and that is the kind of pictures that people have of the various technological advancements that have come to us from Y2K to the beginnings of the internet when Vinge is writing this. And even before that, the same existed as well. This is from an article in Life magazine dated from 1970. Meet Shaky, the first electronic person, the fascinating and fearsome reality of a machine with a mind of its own. That's the machine right there posted in the picture. It's not human looking in any kind of way. It's obviously a big computer with a camera on it. And it was the beginning of people trying to use computers to generate human-like intelligence, human-like interactions even. And the people who participated in this article were talking about a very similar kind of case that Vinge was mentioning in the 90s. Marvin Minsky of MIT's Project Mac, a 42-year-old polymath who has made major contributions to artificial intelligence, recently told me with quiet certitude, in from 3 to 8 years, we'll have a machine with the general intelligence of an average human being. I mean, a machine that will be able to read Shakespeare, grease a car, play office politics, tell a joke, have a fight. At that point, the machine will begin to educate itself with fantastic speed. In a few months, it will be at genius level. In a few months after that, its power will be incalculable. A few months after 1970, I suppose, or a few months after 8 years after that. I had to smile, my instant incredulity, the nervous sort of smile that comes when you realize you've been taken in by a clever piece of science fiction, said the author. When I checked Minsky's prophecy with other people working on artificial intelligence, however, many of them said that Minsky's timetable might be somewhat wishful. Give us 15 years was a common remark. That would be by the 80s. But all agreed that there would be such a machine and that it would precipitate the third industrial revolution, wipe out war and poverty, and roll up centuries of growth in science, education, and the arts. In the same time, a number of computer scientists fear that the godsend may be a golem. Man's limited mind, said Minsky, may not be able to control such immense mentalities. It is not a new figure. It is not a new case that people have been thinking about. And as exemplified here in the 1970s in an issue that is talking about the revolution of co-educational dorms, boys and girls living in the same place, that appeared to be some kind of a new development in the history of the world, which would certainly change a lot of things. But you can put these two revolutions into some kind of a perspective here, the perspective of boys and girls being in the same doors in college, and the perspective of the revolution created by these machines that may be able to think like humans. Certainly, our technology has improved a little bit since then because we have much better images, much better perspectives, much better projections of what the future might look like. And as a result of that, we have slightly better science fiction as well. And we have certainly plenty of works in science fiction kind of showing us what life could be if and when humans are taken over by machines and able to develop some kind of emotional link with machines as well. And if we use these machines to develop better technology, better machines themselves, then they would eventually perhaps create a greater than human intelligence, which would become the number one reason why there is progress, as opposed to at this point in time, progress being still led by humans and our current industrial revolution just kind of petering out the way that it has been, just petering out with computers as opposed to without computers as it did before. So the rules have changed, the reality has changed, but our human behaviors have remained about the same, and machine intelligence has become a little bit of a dud in that context, at least if we look at it from behind the curtain. Humans, though, have been changing as well, and that conversation has also reached the point of humans kind of exceeding their natural quote unquote capacities. One of the ways to do that has been named transhumanism. Transhumanism is a way of thinking about the future that is based on the premise that the human species in its current form does not represent the end of our development, but rather a comparatively early phase. Transhumanism is a loosely defined movement that has developed gradually over the past 2 decades. Transhumanism is a class of philosophies of life that seek the continuation and acceleration of the evolution of intelligent life beyond its current human form and human limitations by means of science and technology, guided by life-promoting principles and values. Humanity Plus formally defines it based on Max Moore's original definition. um, so Humanity Plus is such a transhumanist website slash group of people. Max Moore is a philosopher, futurist, or just a person who is interested in these kind of issues. And this figuring that humans might be fundamentally altered through technological means to become a new stage of human life, or maybe a completely different type of person, is essentially the beginnings of what we will start to know as transhumanism starting in the 90s. So this book, this extract here is from Max Moore's book called Transhumanism, published in the 90s. So the capacities that we have so far to change our human condition using technology are still pretty limited. Although, as we have mentioned over the course of the semester, there are people that are still talking about pushing the limits of aging, pushing the limits of our limbs, and perhaps changing our lives fundamentally. But as much as we tend to live a little bit longer than we used to, we still haven't been that much down further the line. And again, all of these predictions that happened in the 90s have so far not materialized quite as much as a lot of people would like them to. This is a question that is also pretty old, this particular conversation here, talking about senescence. Senescence theory finds immediate and natural support in the fact of our individual ends. Since each separate thinking element of the earth is destined to wither and die, why should the sum total of them all, mankind, be exempt from a similar fate? This is the first thought that occurs to us. But is it sound? Is it certain that we can extrapolate the general evolutionary curve of the species, phylogenesis, on the lines of the evolutionary pattern of the individual, ontogenesis, without making any correction? Nothing proves that we can, and there is a powerful argument against it. For although certain principles of wear and disintegration, which apparently cannot be prevented from growing more pronounced with age, seem to be inherent in the structure of our individual bodies, there is no indication of any similar factor in the global evolution of a living mass as large as the noosphere, where the overriding evolutionary law seems to be that of statistical necessity. It must simply converge upon himself. Once again, the same vocabulary, the same convergence of events, kind of this accelerating curve that we are on that is leading us to some kind of inevitable future where our life is so fundamentally different that we can barely even consider it in the times of our modern lives. Well, modern to a certain extent, because this was published by Teilhard de Chardin in 1953. This is part of an article that he published himself in 1950. In consequence, one is the less disposed to reject as unscientific the idea that the critical point of planetary reflection, the fruit of socialization, far from being a mere spark of the darkness, represent our passage by translation or dematerialization to another sphere of the universe. Not an ending of the ultra-human, but its accession to some sort of transhuman at the ultimate heart of things. This is where the idea of transhumanism comes from in the 1950s at the height of the Industrial Revolution, immediately after World War II, when the European society is kind of reorganizing itself alongside the lines of the new industrial development after having been destroyed in World War II. Theodore de Chardin is a Jesuit priest, scientist, paleontologist, philosopher, teacher, another kind of person that thought about a lot of things, who was a pretty big believer in evolution and tracing the path of evolution to its quote unquote natural, quote unquote logical consequence. It would be a much larger amount of change that could happen from that. Now, again, logical and natural really means things that are really tied to our existence. We have very little control over nature any more than we seem to have a very good grasp on our logic, but that hasn't prevented people from keeping on thinking about these ideas, mostly because of this apparently straight line that we have been on since the middle of the 20th century. There is such a train of thought right now in philosophy currently, for example, here by William MacAskill, who is not a philosopher but an economist, who wrote this book called What We Owe to the Future, which was published this year. And as you can see from this slide, New York Times bestseller. Recently, the idea has been analyzed by mainstream growth economists, including Nobel laureate William Nordhaus. There are two ways in which the AGI, artificial general intelligence, could accelerate growth. First, a country could grow the size of its economy indefinitely, but simply by producing more AI workers. The country's growth rate would then rise to the very fast rate at which we can build more AIs. Analyzing this scenario, Nordhaus found that if the AI workers also improve in productivity over time because of continuing technological progress, then growth will accelerate without bound until we run into physical limits. The second consideration is that via artificial general intelligence, we could automate the process of technological innovation. We have already seen this recently to some extent. DeepMind's machine learning system AlphaFold 2 made a huge leap towards solving the quote unquote protein folding problem. That is, how to predict what shape a protein will take, reaching a level of performance that had been regarded as decades away. If AGI could quite generally automate the process of innovation, the rate of technological progress we have seen to date would greatly increase. This acceleration would apply to the design of AI systems themselves in a positive feedback loop. The idea was formalized in a model by some leading growth economists. Again, they found that AI could produce extraordinarily fast and accelerating rates of growth. Things just keep on accelerating. And what if we accelerate more on this acceleration? What if I see your acceleration and put some acceleration on it to increase forever the capacities that we have to work, to get stuff done, to make money? What would be the results of that? The results would be certainly a very different world, something that we can think about, but something that today is much of a thought experiment. But McCaskill is not the only one thinking like this. There is a whole range of thinkers, generally known as accelerationists, who find themselves thinking about the ways in which we could speed up the process of wherever we are, whatever we are doing now. This accelerationist system has, of course, been applied to technology itself. That's by increasing the technology we have, we would eventually be able to improve our lives through just more technology on top of more technology. Under Bostrom's vision of mass surveillance, humans would be monitored at all times. Come on, switch my slide. Yeah, Humans would be monitored at all times via artificial intelligence, which would send information to quote unquote freedom centers that work to save us from doom. To make this possible, he said all humans would have to wear necklaces or quote unquote freedom tags with multi-dimensional directional cameras. The idea is controversial under any circumstance, but especially at TED, this is part of the TED Talk, which has focused this year on strategies to ensure privacy in the digital era. Even Bostrom recognizes that the scenario could go horribly wrong. Obviously, there are huge downsides and indeed massive risks to mass surveillance and global governance, he told the crowd, but he still thinks the end might justify the means. On an individual level, we seem to be kind of doomed anyway, he said. So perhaps just piling on more technology on top of technology is the path. Perhaps slowing down on the technology is the path. Perhaps just being a little bit more careful about what we're doing could be a possible path as well. But the different ways in which different people have thought about these things are still so far at the level of what ifs, of hypotheses, of thought experiments. And as much as this makes for pretty good science fiction, then what we know so far of our science fiction is that it hasn't really delivered in terms of the teleportation, in terms of jetpacks, in terms of flying cars. All those things that were predicted to be part of our future are still at this point in time very far away. What would happen if it happened is certainly interesting for us to think about, but it is still pretty far from reality. And that concludes this lecture, and that concludes this class.